People assume that if you don't have many friends, something must be wrong with you. That you're lonely, antisocial, emotionally damaged, or quietly failing at life. But psychology tells a very different story, and it's one most people never stop long enough to hear. Think about this. Your phone lights up with a group invitation. Brunch. A party. A gathering where everyone will talk over each other, laugh at things that aren't funny, and ask questions they don't really want answers to. And instead of feeling excited, you feel tired. Drained before it even begins. You'd honestly rather stay home, reorganize your bookshelf, take a slow walk, or sit in silence with your thoughts. For a long time, you might have thought that reaction meant something was broken inside you. That you were missing some essential social gene. But psychologists have been documenting something quietly, consistently, for decades. Some people aren't built for large social circles. And that's not a flaw. It's a psychological orientation. The first thing science makes very clear is something culture constantly gets wrong. Loneliness and solitude are not the same thing. Loneliness is distress. It's the painful feeling that your emotional needs aren't being met. Solitude, on the other hand, can be chosen, nourishing, and stabilizing. You can live with very few friends and feel grounded and fulfilled. And you can be surrounded by people every weekend and still feel deeply alone. Research from the University of Chicago highlights this distinction clearly. What matters isn't how many people are in your life. It's whether the connections you do have actually align with who you are and what you need emotionally. Quantity doesn't protect you from loneliness. Alignment does. That's why someone with 3 close friends they've known for years often feels more secure than someone with hundreds of contacts and endless social activity. The UCLA Loneliness Scale measures this by asking questions like, do you feel isolated, or do you feel understood? And what researchers found is fascinating. People with similar-sized social networks can report completely opposite levels of loneliness. Because what's being measured isn't social volume. It's the experience of being seen, known, and emotionally safe. People who prefer fewer friends are not running away from connection. They're running toward depth. Personality research consistently shows that individuals comfortable with solitude tend to score higher in self-awareness, emotional independence, and intrinsic motivation. They're driven internally. They do things because they matter to them, not because they're trying to be validated, included, or admired. Their inner world is rich, complex, active. And when that's the case, constant social stimulation isn't a reward. It's noise. Many people spend years feeling defective because they don't thrive in loud, chaotic social environments. They wonder why networking events exhaust them. Why group chats feel like chores. Why small talk feels hollow. But the science is clear. The ability to sit alone with your thoughts without panic is not a weakness. Psychologists call it emotional self-regulation. The capacity to process your feelings internally instead of outsourcing that work to other people. And this is where things flip in a way most people don't expect. Studies on loneliness and social connection repeatedly show that people who are comfortable being alone often form deeper, more stable relationships when they do connect. Because they're not reaching out from emptiness. They're reaching out from wholeness. They don't need people to distract them from themselves. They choose people because those connections genuinely add value. Large social circles often require performance. Reading cues. Managing impressions. Keeping up appearances. When you step away from that constant social processing, your brain has room to do something else. Neuroscience calls this divergent thinking. It's the mental state where creativity flourishes. Where ideas connect. Where insight forms. Where original thought emerges without the pressure to conform. This is why solitude has been linked to creativity across centuries. Einstein wasn't romanticizing loneliness when he spoke about the quiet life stimulating the mind. He was describing a neurological reality. Without constant social input, your brain regains bandwidth. People with few friends aren't missing inspiration. They're protecting it. But psychology is honest about the risks too. Preferring solitude doesn't make you immune to loneliness. Research from the National Institute on Aging shows that chronic perceived isolation, the feeling of being emotionally disconnected, can impact attention, cognition, and long-term health. Loneliness, not solitude, is what damages us. That's why the real question is never, how many friends do you have? The real question is, do you feel connected in the relationships you do have? Does your social life align with your nervous system, your personality, your emotional needs? Large-scale studies involving tens of thousands of participants show something quietly radical. Many people with very small social networks report low loneliness and high life satisfaction. Sometimes higher than people with large networks who still feel unseen. This tells us something essential. Human connection is not one size fits all. People who thrive with fewer friendships tend to share certain psychological traits. They have strong internal compasses. They're comfortable with introspection. They have high self-concept clarity, meaning they know who they are without needing constant feedback. They don't fear silence because they've learned silence isn't emptiness. It's space. Space to think. Space to feel. Space to process experiences instead of immediately reacting to them. This doesn't mean they never feel lonely. It means they've learned to distinguish between the temporary discomfort of being alone and the deeper pain of being emotionally unseen while surrounded by others. They know the difference between solitude and abandonment. Culture pushes a very specific narrative about friendship. More is better. Busier is healthier. Louder is happier. But psychology keeps pointing to a different truth. Alignment matters more than volume. Forcing yourself into a social structure that drains you doesn't make you healthier. It makes you disconnected from yourself. Some people genuinely need frequent interaction with many others to feel alive. Their nervous systems are energized by social input. Others need long stretches of solitude and one or two deep connections to stay regulated. Neither profile is superior. They're simply different configurations of the human mind. Problems arise when people force themselves into a social mold that doesn't fit. When they override their own signals because culture told them something was wrong with being selective. When they ignore their own need for depth, quiet, and meaning. The psychology of people with few friends isn't really about friendship at all. It's about self-knowledge. About recognizing that connection exists on a spectrum. And your place on that spectrum deserves respect, not diagnosis. The person with 2 close friends and a rich inner life isn't failing. The person with 50 acquaintances and no one to call at 2 a.m. isn't succeeding. We're all just trying to find the balance between connection and solitude that allows us to be most fully ourselves. Sometimes that balance looks quiet from the outside. Sometimes it looks like choosing the empty Saturday over the crowded brunch. Sometimes it looks like fewer messages, fewer plans, fewer people, and more peace. And psychology is very clear about this. Choosing a smaller circle doesn't mean you're broken. It often means you're listening. Listening to your nervous system. Listening to your values. Listening to what actually sustains you.